Cabbage doesn't think I should make a podcast. She thinks I should play with her.
No.
Oh, she's small and fluffy. Oh. Yeah, so she's having a hard time because we were away for the weekend. And only the next door neighbor who dotes on her and spoils her rotten was here. So you can see how hard things are for a very small cat. But yeah, so we were, visiting friends and stuff like this weekend. And I came home and immediately one of my girlfriends from college is out. So I've been seeing her the past couple of days, and I'm like, this is so many people, oh no! I think, a lot of us, I kind of lost a lot of my socialization muscles in the pandemic. And whereas I used to be out, all the time during the week hanging out with people, now it's like, oh, shit, oh, fuck. I can't believe it. And then, I need my quiet time. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad, not good. So, big night in with the cat tonight is in order, I think you'll find. But
you gotta have it.
You gonna say hi, little one? Oh. There. Say hi. This is a fluff.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, she's so fluffy. Oh, she's so fluff.
She's so annoyed. She's like, leave me alone. Mom, what the fuck?
I didn't say pick me up. I said, come over here to my box. She freaked me out earlier. She was having a nap and she sleep meowed. And it's like a meow I don't know. And I was like, Cabbage. And then that woke her up and we were both just looking at each other like, but it was,
well, that was weird, huh?
So, cat chat. What can I say, Yeah. Yeah, are you good? You're good and fluffy? Okay. Yeah, so, I don't know. Absolutely nothing going on here other than, heavy socialization, which is to say drinking. So, yeah, I'm a bit burnt out.
My socializing function was completely used up, doing this stuff, having people over. There were a bunch of people at the house and everything. And, it was just like, man, I can't. I was like tired. I was literally like, I'm tired. I need to go to bed.
Yeah, it's really hard too. And it's like you want to believe that you can kind of do this whole thing, but then no. Turns out no. Like, I got about like one late night a week in me, possibly, but only if I can really get a sleep in afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Love to age.
Yeah, exactly.
Scam shit. But anyway, yeah, welcome to your 40s. It's going to keep being like this.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I don't really think it comes back. But I don't know, maybe it will. Maybe we'll get used to it again. But, hey-ho.
I think I'm a bit too old for that.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where, like, the older you get, you just, like, injure yourself, and then you're like, oh, I guess this is a problem for the rest of my life. Like, that's never going to come back again. And I think it's kind of the same thing with when the pandemic hit and socializing for me. It's like, well, there it is,
Yeah, well, we had our fun. Time to go home now.
Socializing is a young person's game. It's going to, like, scare all of our listeners are going to be like, oh, shit, oh, fuck. Can't believe that, like, it's all doom and gloom. I'm like, yes, it is, just so you know.
In this regard, yes. Once you start to age, you just like, man. I'm sure there are some of you that will keep the torch going, but it ain't me.
Nah. It was really funny. There's this lady, the lady checking tickets on the train when I was on the way back on Sunday. She, one of the guys who showed her a ticket goes, here you are, young lady. And she was like, ooh, young lady, thank you. I'm 44. And I was like, well, looking good, girl. And she was like, I don't have kids. And I was like, real talk, honey. Real talk. But even then, yeah. What can I say?
Yeah. Yeah, kids will do that to you.
Yep. Hey.
Age you, make you look weird, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, But on the other hand, they take your genes and live on. So who am I to say?
I don't know. I do not know. All right, you ready to do this?
Yeah, let's actually do our job. No fuck. Yeah.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke, and as always, I am an amateurish historian, and with me is Dr. Eleanor Yannicka, who is anything but. Today we are talking more medieval ladies, but first, before we get there, we have a question from Ellen, who says, why the fuck are there two Finno-Ugric speaking countries in Europe? They're pretty far removed from each other, and both of them speak a non-Indo-European language. It makes German compound nouns look like an abbreviation manual. Also, Eleanor, I, as a native speaker of a Slavic language, completely agree with you that Portuguese sounds like it came from Eastern Europe.
Okay, thank you. Vindicated, once again. Shout out to my Slavic brethren for agreeing with me here. Okay, this is a good question, and annoyingly, we don't know. Is the answer. So they certainly are in the same group, but it is pretty distant. Okay, so there's only about 200 words or so, a couple hundred words that are the same in both Finnish and Hungarian. And for Finns and Hungarians, I'm given to understand that each kind of sounds sort of similar. Like it sounds like, oh, I should be able to understand this, but I don't quite. So one of the things that is a similarity among them is that both Finnish and Hungarian puts the stress on the first syllable of the word. And that isn't something that we tend to do. So like they would like put, they go right in and they go in hard. Few hundred words that are related. Stress is the same. And so, I used to kind of think, oh, well, they're not related at all. And we just kind of like put themselves we put them into a category of like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, go over here. Right. And funnily enough, like Estonian actually has more in common with Finnish than Hungarian does. Which is interesting. I mean, of course, the Estonians are much closer to Finland, so I guess that makes sense. And so the languages have kind of grown up along with each other. But basically, we just can't really tell. There's all kinds of like weird ass conspiracy theories like, oh, well, there was an Egyptian group that spoke this way and they eventually moved up here, but then they moved across. No, there's the usual dumbasses who will come out and be like, oh, it's aliens or something, some stupid shit. But like, no. I guess another couple fun things that are similar in Hungarian Finnish, they don't have gendered pronouns. They both love a grammatical case, but I mean, like, so does, for example, Czech. So what are we going to do? And both have this thing where they distinguish, words can be distinguished in their meaning based on what the vowel length is like in a word. So like a hard A or a soft A means that it's a difference in meaning, and where we don't necessarily have that. So yeah, it's a split. We're not sure. This is kind of because there's the Uralic language group, so it's getting complex. So the Finno-Ugrics are like Hungarian and Finnish, but like Estonian is Uralic up with Finnish, so like Finnic. Yeah. So there you go. So I don't know. They wildin' out. But actually, that's fun. I think it's nice when we have mysteries still.
Yeah,
like, it's good to have answers for things. Let's go with ancient Egyptian tribe. Thank you. Right? Yeah, because we can. Yep. Why not? That's the official position of the show. The headcanon. ancient Egyptian tribe. But the real answer is we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know anything about linguistics. I do think it's fun that Hungary is just down there and speaks one of these, Uralic languages, being completely separated from, the rest of them where they are, which is either in central northern Russia or, Finland and the Scandinavia type area. And so it's just like, I think it's cool. It's like the Basque language, just there, completely isolated from everything else. No one knows. It's not,
doing their thing.
Who knows?
Doing their thing.
They got their weird thing. They still talk. They still go on. We can't figure out how the fuck it got there. I think that's neat.
Yeah.
The
More
mysteries
mystery.
of the universe that will probably be, mysteries of our world that will probably never be answered with any like real, certainty. Those are pretty cool. Sometimes, you just can't know everything about history, no matter how many podcasts you make.
And, Lord knows I'm trying. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, that now it just sounds like I was making a dig at you, which I was not. I just more meant history podcasting generally.
It did not. I'm just being a jackass.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ellen, for the question about the Finno-Ugric languages. If you would like to submit questions like this that we will answer here, then please, by all means, subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/WNSDpod. $5 a month. You get bonus episodes, which we'll have our next episode on the Inferno out probably next week.
Woo.
And yay. And then, and you get all of these episodes ad free, so you don't have to hear the weird localized ads that you get, that are based on the location stuff in your phone. And you're like, how the fuck do they know that? It's like, yep.
That's creepy,
We get the weird ones too, yeah. You get access to the Discord, ask questions, like we said, all that good stuff. But anyway, let's move on to the main show. So this week we're returning to our occasional series on great women of the Middle Ages. Why do fellas get all the attention for being great? What about the ladies?
Woo!
Ladies' night on the podcast. Yeah, I'm told that they don't do ladies' nights anymore because that's considered offensive. But I don't. As we were talking about earlier, I don't know because I don't ever go out. Anyway, you remember the drill here. We're going to explore the lives of two women who have massive impacts, even in the highly patriarchal Middle Ages. Last time we did this, we focused on the two Marys, the mother of Christ, and Magdalene, and the ways they were present in the everyday lives of all medieval Christians and even Muslims in the case of the Virgin Mary. Sure, they were classical era women, but that does little to diminish their importance and legacies during the Middle Ages. However, this time we do actually have two medieval women to discuss: Hildegard of Bingen and Eleanor of Aquitaine.
Oh God, two real ones. Anyway,
two real ones. Yep. Each is a titan who bucked the conventional gender norms of the time, effecting change across regions, whole nations, and even across all of Europe. But they did so in dramatically different ways. Hildegard made her impact through her work in religion, music, and science. She was a renowned spiritualist, composer, Benedictine abbess, writer, scientist, and all-around polymath who is now considered a saint by the church and is lauded as the founder of the study of natural history sciences in Germany, which is pretty cool. I'm not the founder of anything. So she was widely known as a woman who was touched by visions from God and, with full papal approval, kept ample records of her many visions, which were published during her lifetime in volumes such as Civius. Eleanor of Aquitaine, conversely, couldn't have been more different. Her arena was that of state politics, marriage alliances, diplomacy, war planning, and even direct rule over entire nations. She held the title Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right, and at various times held the titles of Queen of France, Queen of England, Queen Regent of England, Queen Dowager, backer of a royal rebellion, political prisoner, kingmaker, diplomat, stateswoman, patron of the arts, and mother to many dipshit sons. Yet Despite these disparate approaches, both Hildegard and Eleanor made their marks, and that's what we're talking about today. Eleanor, we will start with a woman close to your own heart, Hildegard of Bingen. Who is she? What do we know about her early life?
Interesting. So in both the cases, we got some overlap on these girlies. They did actually live at the same time for a while. We are not exactly sure when either of them was born.
I love that about historical people, by the way. Just you don't know when they were born. Like, cool. I love that.
Yeah, just like, I don't know, maybe. Like we think she was born around 1098. Okay. Makes it all the way to 1197. Good run. Great innings.
That's a long ass life in any age, but especially, 1200s. Good on you.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So, so there ends up being overlap between the girlies. But so the thing that we know about Hildegard is that her parents are lower nobles. So we know their names. Her dad is Hildebert of Bremersheim, and his mom was Mechthild. There's a name that's gone out of fashion, Mechthild, of Mexhemneinheit. And then this is where also things are kind of like hazy. So we generally tend to say that Hildegard is the youngest of all her siblings, but we don't know how many siblings she has. We only have records of about 7 of them, but it's traditional to say she was the youngest of 10. So I don't know. Now, the thing about Hildegard was she was a sickly child. And she was super, super religious. So she says she started having visions as a child, but she didn't tell anyone about them because of the whole, looking weird thing. But she was pretty devoted to God and religiosity. And her parents were like, well, Lord knows we've had to arrange marriages for X number of children already. This one's kind of sickly. Off to the church you go, right? Yeah. And a normal thing to do, right? Like you basically the family's not banking on her in order to do anything. And the thing is that meanwhile, at the same time, there is another like really famous woman who is Jutta of Sponheim. Okay, so Jutta of Sponheim is a Benedictine anchorite. And now what that means is she is one of those that is like, she kind of has herself restricted to living in one building. Okay, so some anchorites go real weird with it and they get bricked into like a tiny cell.
I'm sorry, what now?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so Julian of Norwich, she gets herself bricked into a tiny cell at the side of a church, and then you have like a little slot where they pass through like food and they pass in and out chamber pots and things like that. Jutta, she's not that flavor. But she's one of the flavor that's like, well, I'm just like, consider me under house arrest for God in this church, right? We got to know this because Hildegard, along with, several other girls, kind of gets like put into Jutta's enclosure, for some enrichment. And so with Jutta, this is where Hildegard starts to kind of like get learned up. Luke's just rubbing his face.
I like all I'm imagining is just somebody cask of Amontillado-ing themselves. Like they're walling it in, like with the brick and mortar, walling in themselves in, like Montresor, no, for the love of God, no. And you're just like talking to like, oh my God.
Yeah, except that they're doing the sickos, haha, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
it's Montresor, for the love of God, thank you.
Woo.
Yay.
That's right. I'm doing this for the love of God.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Jutta's a member of like the higher nobility, and she's really famous. She's like living out in the Palatinate forest, and she has this really big fucking name for herself. So basically, Hildegard's parents are like, yeah, if we're gonna get one of our kids, this makes us look real good, right? So there's a lot of reflected glory to go on here, and so Hildegard learns to kind of read and write from Jutta, but not super well. She is never a great writer, but what does kind of happen is that she kind of has this guy who then basically devotes himself to her. right? She like does her vows and things like that, and then she finds that like, here's like a dude who's like, hey, would you like a secretary?
Yeah.
Right. And so he like starts doing all the kind of like fucking writing around here. And this is a guy called Volmar. Okay. And so he starts like recording all of her visions. So she's kind of like dictating her various works to him. And he's like, hell yeah. And now for him, this is like gold. It's really, really common if you come across someone like this in the Middle Ages, especially if it's a woman, you have like a confessor or somebody who then starts recording everything that they do. Because if you want to gun for sainthood, you need to be able to go to the church and say, hey, here's all the reasons. We've got like a record. We've got a record of this thing. But also for Hildegard's purposes, this is great because she is, she's like not having to write anything down. And like writing is the hard part a lot of the time for medieval people. It's not like the reading, it's the writing. So anyway, eventually Jutta dies in 1136. And by this time, there's this whole mess of women who were living there kind of like under Jutta. And they're like, okay, well, we are going to elect Hildegard as our abbess. Okay. Now, meanwhile, the Dominicans, they're kind of like living alongside these Dominicans. There's this guy, Abbot Kuno, and he is like rubbing his hands together, all like, oh, baby, I've just lost like one famous like holy woman, but I've got this other one who is much more prolific in her writings. We are about to make money. Right? We are about to make a fucking bank here at this monastery. But by this time, Hildegard is so famous, it's like she's corresponding with the Pope. She's corresponding with all kinds of like kings. Like the archbishops are writing back and forth to her. And anyway, so like the abbot kind of goes to her and he's like, oh, well, why don't you become an official order of nuns here? And you can be the prioress. But what that would mean is that she's kind of like definitely under him, like ranked under him. And she's like, well, I don't want to do that. So she writes to the Archbishop of Mainz, Henry I, and says, hi, I want to start my own nunnery away from here. I want permission to go out to the woods and start my own nunnery. Like me and all my girls are about to go. But the abbot is like, I'm not. And so the archbishop goes, yeah, have fun. Like, sounds great. This is good for the church. But the abbot is like, no. Like, I'm absolutely not letting you go. So one of Hildegard's miracles is she goes like on a strike and is like, well, God won't let me move from bed. God wants me like out in the woods. And he wants me out in the woods so hard that he says, until I'm allowed to go out to the woods and start my own community, I can't move from bed. And like this goes on for some time, like to the point where the abbot goes in there and is like trying to lift her out of bed, but then he can't do it. And he's like, oh shit, word. God is making her super heavy and she can't get out of bed. Yeah.
It's not that I just don't lift anything ever and I just sit around looking at books all the time and yelling at nuns. No.
No, awesome. God's done this.
Like this guy didn't do arm day. It's, disrespectful, honestly. Be a good steward of your body, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Your body is a temple. Come on now. Yeah, so off she goes and she manages to start finally her own monastery. So like this is kind of like the big thing. So it's a specific nunnery and they do all kinds of things. She ends up getting 2 because there's just so many chicks who are like, fuck yeah, girls time. Like we're going out. So meanwhile in all of this, like a girl's having visions, right? Okay. And she refers to kind of like the visions that she has as, the shade of the living light. Ooh.
I love it.
Isn't that good? Like, it's very poetic. And, basically, so she has visions on all sorts of things where it's like she has visions about Antichrist. She has visions about, the end of the world. She has the visions about the Mother of God. She has all these kind of things that are kind of revealed to her, is what she says. And, part of these are compiled into generalized books. But so like Scivias is kind of like one of those. But she also writes all kinds of things. So it's like, yeah, you have like the real visionary texts that are talking about, God, the church, what the future might hold. But she's also writing what we now kind of record as like natural philosophy. So she writes an absolute ton about medicine, about useful plants. She's writing like medical works where it's like, okay, yeah, boil these things together. Like my girl has like skincare tips. Like she's like making face washes and stuff for the ladies. She's a real girly girl. And, for a lot of my work, she comes up again and again. And one of the reasons I really like her is because she takes these positions that are kind of like slightly contrarian to all the dudes. So when guys will be like, for example, like women are horny monsters who want to destroy everything. She's like, not really, ho. And also like, by the way, semen is poisonous. and she'll like, she'll do things like that where she's like, actually women's sexuality is like the sea, and she's the first I know,
nice.
Right? Yeah, right I was like, it's not like a forest fire, it's like the sea, and it's like being lapped by gentle waves. She's the first person in Europe to record the experience of women's orgasm. Yeah, so it's like she writes about it in terms of like the contractions that people with vaginas experience during orgasm as kind of like you being used to suck semen in order to kind of like create babies. So she does all this stuff that is pretty radical. Right? I'm sure that you've seen like her cosmic map of the universe that is like just a vulva map.
Yeah, I'm getting a little I'm picking up on some vibes here,
yeah.
About Hildegard.
Hildegard. Yeah. So, Hildegard is pro the sexuality of ladies, right? So and the thing about this is
Good for her.
Ordinarily, you would kind of think, oh well, this is the sort of thing that people will shut down, but people fucking loved her.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. So like the church, when they hear like, oh, here's a lady having like ecstatic visions. Oh, she's seen choirs of angels and like is able to map them out. Is she? Like they send people up to go check it out because you can't have that kind of, right? Like you can't have people just kind of saying these things because what if they're just talking nonsense, right? But the church sends guys up there and they come back and they're like, fuck yeah, yes, I love Hildegard. Like her work is so cool, and they are just completely into her. So she manages, even though she's saying these things that are kind of like, we think are quite outrageous and are quite daring, that is accepted and even championed by the church. Like at one, it's like a Pope Eugenius III is like, she is so cool. Like when her works hadn't been like read aloud, weren't finished yet, he was like having people go get them and read them to her. Like he's a fan. Like, nice. Please go get a hold of this before it's published or whatever. And so like everybody kind of starts like writing to her. So she's got like correspondence going with like half of the important people in Europe, and like that's like really cool. So she's doing medical things, she's doing religious things, then on top of that she's doing all this musical work because she's just like, she can do it all. She's a polymath, right? So in the meantime, she more particularly she does a lot of plays. So she puts on she writes these plays for the nuns to put on, which interestingly they kind of get away with, although the church is kind of looks down on members of the clergy getting involved in mystery plays and things like that because hoes get too into it. They go all like drama school on you, and they're like, you're a priest, knock it off or whatever. But nuns, they're like, okay, well, whatever, right? So she writes one thing which is called the Ordo Virtutum, which has like a ton of songs in it. But then, there's something like, we have kind of like 69 surviving musical compositions.
Nice.
Right. And we know that, like, so we have like the words to those, but we don't always have like all of the music, but we know that they're supposed to be songs because it's like all of these are musicals, all of them. Right. But Ordo Virtutum, the one that we have a lot, it's like your pretty standard morality play, kind of deal. It has 82 songs in it.
Wow.
And it has like absolutely nothing to do with like the mass. It's not like, oh yeah, you could do this during the mass or anything like that. It has nothing to do with a feast day. It's not like, oh, I composed this for Michaelmas or whatever. It's just like, I hope you're ready for a religious musical, 82 song, like, oh, pass me the aux chord. You're not going to do an 82 song, morality play, are you? No,
no,
like,
never. Oh,
so,
fuck, it accidentally happened. What do you know?
Yeah, and like people still put them on.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's really cool. So I mean, and it is it's an allegory about sin, and guess what? If you confess and repent, you'll be forgiven.
Thank God.
I mean, I bet you're surprised to hear that.
I am, actually.
But the thing that's funny about it, why it's called the Ordo Virtutum, is that they have these embodied presentations of the virtues who are all women. And virtues, aka the women, are the people who kind of like restore the faithful. It's not like any of the prophets. It's not any male sense. It's like, so this is quite interesting because it's kind of hinting to all the things that you see in splits from the Catholic Church later about, it's about kind of like the cultivation of virtue and your inner relationship with God. And that's the thing that matters, right? So basically, and then there's also like a devil who is a man, which is quite funny. And we think that like Hildegard's secretary is probably had to play the devil because it's like the only dude who was around. And the devil is like the only guy who doesn't sing. He just screams.
That's awesome.
So it always kind of makes me think about the Silmarillion, and like all the singing and then stuff. And it's like, I don't like that song.
I'm doing my own song. I don't like you, God.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, ah, ah, which is quite funny. So, like, there's all these characters play, but it's like this is one for the ladies by the ladies. There's also like a kind of liturgical cycle that she wrote, which is cool and nice, and you can use that for mass. But it's kind of like, how the fuck did she learn how to do this, right? And it's like, sure, there's a lot of music that happens in convents and things, but original composition is a completely different animal to, these are the kind of chants that we ordinarily do for the orders of the day, right? Like whatever you're chanting at Compline and being like, hey, I wrote us a new Compline chant. That's one thing. Being like 82 song masterpiece. Totally different thing, right?
They're like, whoa, I'm not ready for the whoa.
Yeah, completely. Like this is like a revelatory for medieval folks. They're like, I can't believe this shit. And so, she's got like this huge kind of canon of actual works, and because she's very popular, they spread. So it's like people are like, oh yeah, Hildegard, she writes all those bangers. Oh, you say she's got a medical manual, Causa et Cure? I'll have that, thanks. She's got a bunch of divine visions that she's seen. I'll have those. So they kind of like move around all the time. Meanwhile, she's doing like off-piece side projects. It's like getting real fantasy writer. She like makes up an alternative alphabet. Yeah.
Tolkien, there you go.
Right? Yeah. And it's kind of like, I know, it's sort of like a code, kind of thing. So it's like, and people have broken it. Like, people know how to do it. They think that this is kind of like a good way to be like, the nuns like writing to each other in it. right?
Yeah.
So that's like one kind of theory on it. Other people say that like she was just kind of using it as an easier way to kind of teach language. And like it wasn't supposed to be a secret, but one way or another, it's out there. So, she is just doing some crazy shit. Like she's good. Like Tolkien kind of went Hildegard of Bingen is kind of how it is. So like she's really, really, really big during her lifetime. She is kind of like writing to multiple popes. Is Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, enemy of the podcast, is someone who wrote back and forth to her, which is funny because so she like I suppose this makes her maybe possibly an Abelard hater. So notable. Notable. And so basically it was kind of like a done deal that like this girl was about to get canonized like at some point in time. But, the whole thing takes a really, really long time. So everyone kind of thought that she'd be like blessed and it would kind of like go on. But she's actually one of the people where the whole canonization process first is applied to. Okay, because it used to just be like you could be holy enough and the church would be like, well, there's nothing we can do about this. The Germans seem to like her a lot, so it's about to happen.
Yeah. It
took like 4 tries to get her canonized, and she kept stalling out at beatification. She was kind of like considered to be, quite blessed or whatever. And people kind of like called her a saint, but technically, she was not canonized until 2012.
Hurtful.
Which is really weird, right? Because like JP2 would be all like, oh yeah, Saint Hildegard. Everyone, it was like one of those things where people kind of thought she was sometimes. And so anyway, like fucking Ratzinger is the one who did it. Where, so like,
that's rough.
Yeah, but Germans, isn't it?
Yeah.
So and so she got equivalent canonization. And so now as a result, she's considered one of the doctors of the church, which is cool. So, like it's her, there's Aquinas, people like this. And so, like, basically everybody kind of agrees that she's cool, but she doesn't kind of get that sort of last step to essentially be called saint for a really long time, even though ordinarily this would have happened. But that's kind of like showing how by kind of like the 12th century and things like this, the church has really started to kind of like flex itself, right? It's starting to turn into a legal thing, and they're like, I don't know, like it's totally fine that this chick is out in the German woods making vagina plays or whatever, but like that doesn't mean anything necessarily, even if everyone is like bonkers for her, right?
Yeah I think it's crazy that she went on like speaking and preaching tours. That's wild. That's fucking wild to me. They were just like, yep, there you go, cool. Like
this is what passes for fun for medieval people, right?
Oh God.
So like medieval people love preaching, right? Medieval people are like 82 song play, yes. Like, they're like, brick me up in a wall, sing me 82 religious songs. Like this is gonna be a hot night on the town. This is for them. Yeah. They just got a real different sense of what fun is. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Well, actually, though, sometimes they don't, right? Because sometimes you're like beer festival and having sex in a field. Yeah, I get that. I understand what that is. And then sometimes they're like 82 songs, like.
and then they're like 82 songs by this obviously lesbian coven. I mean,
yeah, right.
I mean, nunnery. Excuse me.
Everybody loves the lesbian coven.
I mean, yeah. You got to. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it's cool. I like how the girlies are doing their thing. And it's interesting to see this woman actually kind of make it out, because there are these specific attempts to keep her under wraps and to keep her under the specific control of men. And she's like, no, you can't do that. Like she's like one of the few who manages to do it, and that's really neat. Kind of makes you realize how much we did lose. You know what I mean? Yeah.
She just seems really cool. I knew a lot about the scientific writing and stuff, but until I started researching this episode, I didn't know much about her music. And it's like, yeah, she's, mostly known for like these like insane musical compositions. I'm like, huh, neat.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Like, yeah, she's like, I think what was I reading? She's the most recorded composer of sacred monophony ever in like the modern history. That's like, that's cool. Like, I mean, like, that's like that was all music was for like 5,000 years, and she's the biggest one.
And she's the biggest one. Yeah. Like, it takes us a while to come up with polyphony. Like it's kind of like 14th century. So
they're like, no, I don't want that shit. I don't want two. Leave me alone.
I don't know what do you mean two? All right, someone's fancy. Woo!
Oh, two. Oh, what's
peanut butter and jelly. You sound crazy.
Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah. So that is Hildegard. And then we move on. Yeah, she is cool. And then we move on to Eleanor of Aquitaine, whose life was a little different. She she didn't cloister herself up into a small hole with the rest of her lady friends.
Like, kind of at some points in time, like a jailed, but my girl here has like 10 kids, right? So it's kind of like on the one end you've got like a lesbian group chant, and on the other you've got like real clown hours in terms of like making billions of children, right? So. And hilariously, Eleanor, like one of the most powerful women to have lived in the medieval period, like an absolute phenom. Once again, we do not really know when she was born.
I love it. I love when we don't know when people are born.
Yeah, we're like 1122. I don't know.
All right, I don't know. Maybe. Yeah.
1122 to 1204. We know when she died. We're real clear on that. Yeah. They're like, oh, this bitch is important. Write this down. She's dead. And she's born somewhere in Aquitaine, as we know. But we don't really know. We're like, what? We don't really know. It's kind of odd. But kind of like her deal is, so she's the oldest of 3 kids of William X, the Duke of Aquitaine. Okay. And he is very, very important. They have absolutely tons of money. This is a really rich area of France. And like her mom is incredibly important as well. She's kind of come from Châteauroux, which is also very, very important. And what is interesting about Eleanor is that like her dad was like, this is my heir. Kind of like right away. Didn't do the whole, my kingdom for a son thing. He was like, no, like we're going with it. We
got it. She's good.
She's fine. And, everybody agrees that her dad was like, get this girl an education. Here we go. So she basically gets kind of like a full liberal arts education, as well as learning a lot of history as well. So, she's numerate. She can identify constellations. She knows everything, that really well-educated men knows. She's also got all the girl shit unlocked. She can do embroidery. She can run a household, all of these things. She's also, like, by all accounts, really fun. Yeah. So, a really good dancer, a fun conversationalist. She can play chess, which is a really big deal for medieval people. She can sing. She plays the harp. She also is like an outdoorsy girl. She can hunt. She hawks. She's an incredibly good writer. She speaks several languages. Like her Latin is excellent. And so, like, she has a younger brother, William, but he dies along with their mom when he's about 4. And so her dad is like, okay, yeah, well, there you go. Like, she'll, I guess that's it. And well, he was only 4, and I've already put rather a lot into this one, so I guess this is what we're going with. And so, as a result of this, Eleanor becomes the vassal of the King of France. and the Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right, which is bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on one sec.
Okay.
Just inhaled something.
Oh, goodness.
Good times. So yeah, like it's one of these interesting things though, because obviously like her part of what her dad was doing here was getting her ready to be the kind of wife that people would want. So it's like he's basically saying kings only. Mm-hmm. Right? Like this is, and you know, you can kind of like see that, you know, you don't waste an education like this on a chick you're going to marry off to like some no account province somewhere. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is the fanciest girl there is. And oh, by the way, look at all her huge tracts of land, you know?
Yeah. Huge vast tracts of land. Yeah.
Exactly. So she's kind of like all fancied up, but you know what happens when you're all fancied up and you control that much land and you have your own vassals who are like swearing fealty to you? You get queened.
Yep.
You know,
you become wifed up.
Oh yeah, she got wifed the fuck up, and so she becomes the wife of Louis of France, and you know Louis VII, one of the worst Louis. But you know, like Queen of France, like that's a pretty good one. And they seem to have got on kind of like okay, but the first part of their kind of marriage first is kind of really characterized by the fact that like she can't get knocked up. They seem to be trying, but it's really, really kind of difficult for her to do so. So when the Louis VI dies of dysentery, as is traditional, like Eleanor and Louis are like, oh, okay, well, I guess like we're king and queen now. But you would have thought they would have been a little bit further along in the process of kind of like having a family, establishing all these things. Mm-hmm. But off she goes to kind of like Paris and like the French lands, and like the Northerners don't like her, kind of. Everyone is kind of like, oh, why is this pretty bitch so much smarter than me and having a nice time, right? And like the king, but is like sprung, right? He's like, woohoo! Who's seen my hottie wife? You like that shit? But then like Louis is an idiot, and he gets into this big conflict with Pope Innocent II. And so basically it's like there's an archbishopric, Bourges, that like needs a new archbishop. And so he's like, okay, well, I've got just the guy for the job. But Pope Innocent is like, I think you'll find investiture is something that popes do. And Louis like, get fucked. You know, investiture controversy, jazz hands. You know, right? Like,
yeah, woo!
So basically, there is kind of like a big thing goes back and forth where Louis swears on some relics that the guy the Pope wants is never going to even enter Bourges. So he then has an interdict put upon him. And like, which means that like, you know, kind of anyone can sort of like start attempting him. And Eleanor has to go suit this out, right? Mm-hmm. Eleanor has to go and be like, my fucking husband, you know, and then like, you know, apparently like plays it pretty girly and is like, oh, I'm just my husband's just a little birthday boy and I haven't even been able to have a kid yet. And like, she like fucking, of course it's Bernard of Clairvaux. Of course it's Bernard of Clairvaux who's like, you know, talking with her. This guy's everywhere. I hate this man. And like, but then Bernard is like, girl, well, if you can kind of like get your husband to agree, I bet God will help you get knocked up. And then like the legend is that it's like she manages to kind of get Louis to back down, which is kind of like a traditional queenly behavior. Like that's one of the big things that queens do is like when kings wild out, they intercede, and then it makes kings kind of feel better. Because they can go, I'm granting a favor to my wife. Yeah. You know, I didn't back down and I wasn't wrong, but my wife asked for this. Okay. So, but then there was like a big massacre in the whole time. Louis burnt the entire town of Vitre to the ground. Okay. Like, so, you know, yeah. You know, and so, you know, Eleanor gets him, you know, back in line with the church and everything, but he feels bad. So he's like, okay, well, I want to go on crusade to the Holy Land. And this is going to, atone for my sins. It's going to get me right with, the Pope. But the Pope Eugene III is in power by this time. And he's like, yeah, because I'm also, the Frankish states are falling apart. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, off they go on the Second Crusade. And this is where it all goes wrong for these two. Because basically, like, Eleanor's uncle is out there, and he is the Prince of Antioch. Mm-hmm. And their stated goal when they went over there is they were just supposed to kind of, like, shore stuff up in, states like Antioch. But, like, basically on the way, Louis is like, nah, brah, we retaken Jerusalem, which was, like, 100% not going to happen. Eleanor, interestingly, kind of like has her own army that she leads. Mm-hmm. And like when they get to Constantinople, the Byzantines are like cranking it about this. They're like, oh my God, she's like an Amazon. Oh, wow. Like, look at, whoa, woo, shit. And like, everyone in Constantinople is incredibly charmed by her. Mm-hmm. But then like after they kind of like get past Byzantium, everything goes very sideways very quickly. Louis hears that Conrad III of Germany had got like a big victory against the Turkish army. And so he's like, quick, we've got to go do something. Like, doesn't wait for Eleanor's uncle. Won't like get any kind of like information from people on the ground. Weirdly here, there's these kind of stories that are like, sometimes people think that maybe Eleanor didn't lead her own army, and that like saying that Eleanor led her own army is a way of saying, and that's why everything went bad. Because this woman thought she could lead it. But at some point in time, like, Eleanor's army gets separated from Louis's army, and then they get attacked. And anyway, like, the point is, does Jerusalem get retaken? The fuck it doesn't. Everything ends in tears. And then they are like, this marriage is over. Right?
Yeah.
And they kind of, like, go back to France, not together.
Yeah.
Let me just put it this way. And then like they have like Eleanor then gets like lost in a shipwreck and like nobody knows where she is for like a month, but then I don't know, like then there she is. So then the Pope is like, okay, well, you can get divorced. They petition the Pope for a divorce, and they get their petition granted on the grounds of consanguinity. So they're like, we are too closely related and we shouldn't be married. Mm-hmm. And the Pope's like, right, you are. Eleanor immediately gets engaged to the King of England, Henry II, to whom she is more closely related than Louis. But like, there's a reason for doing this. Like, there's a couple attempts to kidnap her in the meantime. Mm-hmm. Because like she's managed to have like a couple kids for the King of France, who she basically like doesn't see again. It's like, the Princess Alex and all this stuff are like off with Louis. But a couple people try to kidnap her and force her to marry them. And so she's like, okay, well, we got to get out in front of this. And Henry II has always had a real boner for her. Like, he's met her a couple of times. And so, for him, this is the equivalent of, like, marrying, the bikini poster on your wall.
Yeah.
It is a weird one. He is a teenager. She's in her 30s. But he's like, awooga, and...
Hey, man, look. If the hottest woman in Europe came up to me when I was like 17 and was like, hey, I would be like, yes, ma'am, anything,
whatever it takes,
queen,
right?
Yeah, sure, you could be, like, yeah, absolutely. Like, no, very few teenage boys are just gonna be like, no, I cannot satisfy you. We're not the same. Like, nope, you're taking that challenge and you're gonna fucking do it.
It's just like it's funny because now we're all like, oh, like this is like a problematic age gap relationship, and Henry's like, I see no problem. I just want to make it
God appointed me to this role. How dare you? How dare you say I cannot make these decisions? Yeah,
but it's just an incredibly like excellent move on Eleanor's part, because it's like such a fuck you to Louis too. She's like,
it really is.
And it's like Henry's still the prince at this time, but she's like, I'm still going to be a queen. Yep. So, get fucked. Right? Yep. Like, I'll be up here. By the way, I still own that giant chunk of your kingdom. So, like, here we go. Eventually Henry's dad, well, it's not Henry's dad. Henry's uncle dies because like Henry becoming the King of England was the compromise between, at the end of the anarchy. It was kind of like, so, like, anyway, his uncle dies. Here you go. Here's Henry, right? And the other thing about Henry is like he's kind of like related to like he's the son of Matilda of England, so he obviously has a hard on for smart girls because I don't know something Freud. I don't believe in Freud, but whatever. So
look,
like
some people have the hots for things that remind them of their mother. Just because Freud said it doesn't mean it's not true. The rest of his shit though, I'm not copping to, but
no.
That is a thing.
Like, Eleanor gets pregnant pretty much immediately, is, like, hugely knocked up by the time Henry, like, gets onto the throne. And then, like, proceeds to have many children with Henry. In a relationship which I think we could safely say it's tumultuous, right? So, like, at a point in time, right, like, she has all these kids. Like Henry is just like conquering. Like this is his thing. He's like he's trying to conquer Wales, and he's like conquering here, there, and everywhere. And he's always in a boat, and like he just comes back. She gets knocked up. Whatever. He's like, let's go try to claim Toulouse through your line, and she's like, oh goddamn, whatever. And then eventually, at a point in time, Henry then takes up. He gets himself a girlfriend in about 1166. His girlfriend is called Rosamund Clifford, and Eleanor is like, cool, here's John, our final child. You will find me in Aquitaine.
Yeah.
Which is like really quite funny because so she fucks off to Poitiers, and she's like, all right, bye. And like weirdly, like, kind of Henry has control of John for whatever reason, but she fucks off to Aquitaine, and Henry proceeds to kind of like go about with Rosamund everywhere and is like, everybody, you like my girlfriend? You like my girlfriend? And a lot of people kind of like perceive this as an attempt to goad Eleanor into divorcing him. And she's like, no, I don't care. I am simply having a very fancy court down in Poitiers and I am ignoring you. La, 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 la. I can't hear you. Right. That isn't to say that she isn't like probably annoyed by it, but like you're not gonna catch a girl slipping, right? And this is where the legend of the courts of love comes from. So it's like whether or not the courtly love game where you go up to Eleanor of Aquitaine and go, riddle me this. If a chick is in love with someone, but then someone else asks to be her stand-in, if she ever falls out of love with him, but then she marries the guy she's in love with, does she have to be that guy's girlfriend, the second guy's girlfriend now, because you can't love your husband? Like there's this legend that like Eleanor and her daughters were kind of like presiding over these things. We don't know if that's true or not, but it was written about. And by the 14th century, courts do things like this. Like you can go down to Barcelona and they'll be doing that, right? So
that's awesome. Yeah,
it's really fun. But we definitely know, as we've talked about before, a lot of troubadours about the joint. A lot of like, if you are trying to make money as a singer, you want to get down to Poitiers because like that's what's going on.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Eleanor has the time to foment some light rebellion.
Yeah,
maybe. Maybe.
You're like, hey, my son, my lovely son.
She's got some large adult sons.
What if you killed your dad? Like just. What
about that?
Yeah. What if you just killed him, huh?
Like Henry II, he did this thing where he crowned Henry, the young Henry, we tend to call him, a king really early on. Because, you got to understand, if you're coming out after the anarchy, you really want to establish the order of succession. It's just like, it's going to be this guy, right? And Henry is essentially like a kind of football player type, right? Like, never a thought in his... He likes to joust. And he's like, for a while, just running around being like, yeah, then me and my homies, we went and jousted. Way. Then we went over there and we jousted. Woo! But then eventually he's like, I feel like Dad doesn't let me have enough power. Am I the king or not? Like, what's going on? And Henry's like, oh, I thought someone was jousting. What's all this I hear about wanting actual responsibility, right? So Eleanor kind of like probably lightly encourages this rebellion. Like she kind of rolls the dice.
Yeah.
Right. She rolls the dice, and Henry is unsuccessful. Let's put it that way. And he dies shitting himself to death, not friends with his father, which is a bit of a shame. Whatever. So anyway, this whole thing, meanwhile, like the other sons, Edward and Richard, they're also involved. The only son that is not is John, because he's daddy's special little guy. His papa is a special boy. And so, like, they basically, everything goes wrong. And so Eleanor, we think, kind of like mediates this sort of truce. Sorry. Where she kind of says, I'm going to turn myself in. Okay. You can arrest me, but you need to leave the boys alone.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's
Inhaling
okay.
shit. And so she says, like, leave the boys alone. We've got to get things back to normal. Obviously, this didn't work out, but someone's got to get punished, right? Kind of. Here you go, it's me. And she basically gets taken back to England and put under house arrest, quote unquote. Which means that she goes and like lives in several castles. It's not great. Okay, let's be honest. It's not great. It means that she can't do a lot of kind of like ruling as she would. She can't kind of like oversee things in Aquitaine so much. She kind of gets Richard to do that instead. She's living in the kind of splendor that you or I will never enjoy, She basically sees the kids at Christmas. She gets trotted out. Anyway, hilariously, once Henry finally does kind of like kick the bucket or whatever, by this time, like both of the eldest boys are dead. So Richard becomes king, and he's Mama's special little boy. Mama's special little boy. So the first thing he does is like let my mom out of jail, and like someone goes to go be like, you better let Queen Eleanor out, and she's already out of jail. She's like already like, what's up?
Yeah.
And like she goes to London and gets crowned, like does all the ceremonies in Richard's place. Like it isn't Richard, it's her. And then meanwhile, Richard is also kind of like a football guy. He just kind of like wants to go off on crusade. Like that's his major thing. He likes to go attack castles, right? That's what he does for fun. And so someone's got to fucking run England. And guess who that is? It's Eleanor. Like she's the one doing all the goddamn work about this place, right? So basically rules in the stead of Richard, and pretty well, like really kind of writes the ship as like finally like somebody competent around here. Not that Henry wasn't. Henry was a very competent ruler, but it kind of means that like any excesses of like her several horrid football sons weren't kind of vested on the realm. And so like part of it's funny because there's these two kind of ways of looking at this period of rule. There's the kind of like legendary Robin Hood time where it's like, oh, well, there wasn't a strong king to kind of keep people together. And we were all just hoping that King Richard would come back and straighten everything out. But really Eleanor was ruling everything, and it's going fairly competently. It's kind of okay. But that kind of version of it is really wrapped up with the fact that John ends up being not a particularly liked ruler. At the very least, I think that he's put in a really difficult situation, and it would have been hard to deal with. But even when Richard is dead, then and John takes the throne, Eleanor's pretty involved, like pretty well fucking involved. Like tries to kind of steer John towards better things, but eventually just kind of like leaves and goes back to like she's like, I'm over it. I don't really want to be in England anymore. You're going to have to figure out how to do this without me, and goes back to France and is like, peace, bye suckers. But even in the very, very late stages of her life, she's still doing the kind of the typical queen shit that you would expect her to do. So it's like, her granddaughters from Castile get like, engaged to people in France, and she goes down and picks which granddaughter it's going to be and then like escorts them. But she keeps getting fucking kidnapped. Like she's just getting kidnapped every 5 minutes, like, because it's like, haha, I've got the King of England's mum and, like whatever. And she's like, I swear to fuck, if I get kidnapped even one more time. I cannot do this. So she eventually kind of retires to Fontevraud, which is kind of like a big nunnery, which was really the style at the time. For rich ladies, it's like you would go to a nunnery and then, like spend some time reading and praying or whatever. So basically she then dies, and like that's it. But it's just an incredible run. Like really incredible run as, a ruler, like a woman who really exercises a lot of power in her own right and a lot of power in the names of her sons. In a way that you do not often see. Not necessarily well liked at the time as a result of all of this. Like everyone's kind of like, you now we're like a hottie with like an excellent education who can run things. Like surely everybody loved her. And it's like, no, people were like, I heard she was fucking her uncle when she was in the Holy Land. Like like a century later, people were like, she was fucking Saladin. Like she was.
Yeah, woo!
Like, I mean, it's like the number one thing that you do is that you call her a slut, right? And like, there's a lot of really weird accusations of who she was shagging. Yeah, and it's like probably not, probably not. So, but it's very interesting because even like the Victorians and the historiography were pretty damning of her because they like were like, well, it says here that she was shagging Saladin, like. And similarly, they're not really sure that they like the sound of a lady having all that power. So we are kind of like revisiting her, as I think as a group in general, and kind of saying, oh, wait, no, actually, this is pretty boss. So yeah, like liking her is kind of new, which is surprising, right?
Yeah, So I did have this question, and I was kind of saving it to the end because I didn't want to, didn't want to overshadow any of her actual accomplishments, but like, and it's a question I have about other historical women too. Like, there are some women who are just considered like they were hot, like even though obsequious language is kind of written about all noble women and stuff like that at the time, like, but like her, and I mean, obviously, there's like Cleopatra and Anne Boleyn, like how do historians how do historians go about being like, no, yeah, she was the fucking hottest woman alive, even though all the language is just kind of like, oh, a classic beauty.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one because medieval people aren't big ones for writing down descriptions of living people. They have kind of like poetic things that you say about everyone, and they do kind of throw them around. It does seem to be that they will say that someone is beautiful if they are considered beautiful, however. And one of the reasons we probably know that she is beautiful is because everyone, even her haters, talk about it. Yeah, but there are certain things like we don't know what color her hair was. We don't know what color her eyes were. Could have been like whatever. Like we kind of know what we know about her is that like someone calls her more than beautiful or père pulchre. Like people say that she's like the embodiment of charm. People are like, oh yeah, she's an admirable beauty. Like people talk about it all the time, and people talk about it all the time even when they're slagging her off, and that's kind of how it's true, right?
Like, they're like, oh, I fucking hate her. I mean, don't get me wrong, though. Just a fucking great ass. But I hate her guts.
But I hate her guts. It's just like, God, I can't believe that God would have put a pair of tits like that on such a terrible woman, right? Kind of deal. So we probably know she's hot. And one of the reasons we kind of think that she's hot, too, is like how her husbands, at least in the early stages, are both like quite hot for her. Now, is this actual hot, or is this like hot for a royal person? Yeah. That's difficult to say. Yeah. Right? Because it's like these hoes inbred, right? Like, yeah. And it's also kind of like a complex because like in the early medieval period, for example, if you've got a queen and they call her beautiful, it's probably true because a lot of them like sometimes were like formerly enslaved and then they get jumped up to queen and then you're like, yeah, she was hot. Yeah. Right? Like that's why she got jumped up to queen. Right? It's like they don't pick them if they ain't hot. Yeah. But by the time you've got like this whole thing about, noble breeding and everything, it's hard to say. But we just have to assume that even when hostile witnesses are like, yeah, it's true though.
Yeah. They're like, oh, you got to hand it to her. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I just kind of wanted to know because I was just like, you like all the stuff I read is, like she's praised for her beauty. She's beautiful, even, she's considered beautiful among all these women. I'm just like, the portraits of people back then didn't really have a lot of
not
didn't really have a lot
a lot of verisimilitude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like and even when you get like like we've got her effigy in her tomb, and it's like, well, that looks like a medieval statue. Okay, so
yeah.
So who knows, right? And granted, if she's beautiful to them, she might not be beautiful to us, because the way that they think people are hot is totally different. But part of it is just in the language used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like it's so superlative.
Yeah.
That
It at some point, like, that people, like, there's no reason to like pile that level of obsequiousness up. So they probably are like, damn, she's fucking hot though. She's like, fuck.
Yeah. And like everyone is like kind of can get together on this one. So and it's also like one of the things that when Henry takes up with Rosamund, it's like everyone is like, oh, and she was even hotter. What? Or it's kind of like used to be like, oh yeah, but Eleanor was aging. Yeah. So he like went out and got himself a new version, right? And so it's like, wow, how hot can you be to replace Eleanor of Aquitaine? Yeah. Oh my God, like this kind of thing. But Rosamund dies after a couple of years, so
Man, rip to the Queen's new smoke show. Rip.
Yeah, hilariously, like apparently the Victorians really had this thing for like waxing lyrical about her, so they don't like Eleanor because she's not an angel in the house or whatever, but they all are like, oh, the beautiful Rosamund. Shut the fuck up. Victorians just like home wrecking. Like they're like, I love an angel in the house because that means that you can go hire several sex workers and feel better about it. Kind of weird group of people.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So that's Hildegard and Eleanor of Aquitaine. About the only thing that I think they have in common is they do both appear in Civilization 6. Eleanor is a leader that you can pick, and she's actually pretty good at it, and or she's actually pretty interesting when she erodes loyalty from other civilizations and gets their cities to flip to you. And she's pretty cool. And Hildegard is a great person who you can acquire, who gives one of your holy sites a science bonus as well. So that's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah, that's there you go. That's my input here. Next time we come back, we will either be doing an interview or you will be hearing us talk about, do one of our Medieval Fail Sons episode about, the many fail sons of Eleanor of Aquitaine. Because unfortunately for her legacy, this is one thing, this is one thing you can't, you're not going to be able to walk back, because boy, were her sons dumb as shit.
Oh my God.
As compared to her daughters, who all seemed at least pretty capable and did what they had to, but her sons, my God.
Real gendered divide, let's just say that.
All the genetics,
it's like the Simpsons gene, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You got her son, you got like King John, who's like, I get in accidents for the insurance money. And her daughter's like, I gave birth to the future Holy Roman Emperor so-and-so, and was a loving wife and took care of the kingdom, blah, blah. And the other ones are like running headfirst with each other with pans on their head. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. Well, that's what's coming up next. Next time. But thank you so much for listening. Do subscribe to the Patreon. Do leave us good reviews on Spotify and Apple and all that jazz. But Eleanor, what you got going on?
You can, as usual, catch me on my bullshit on Twitter over at Going Medieval, and increasingly on Blue Spot Guy at Going Medieval. You can always pick up any of my books. That'd be nice. The Ones from Future Sex or The Middle Ages, The Graphic History. That's cool. This month I'm going to try to actually get something written on the blog going-medieval.com. I think I'm going to write about how I get really annoyed by that whole "we are the daughters of the witches you couldn't burn" thing. which I really
right.
hate.
Yep.
So yeah, look for that sometime this month. And yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter. Luke is amazing. I'm on Blue Sky as well, but I've talked about that before. It's cool. But yeah, if I don't follow you, sorry. I don't log on there very much. Yeah, and you can find my old show, People's History of the Old Republic. It's about Star Wars. You can find it wherever you're listening to this, if you want to. But again, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye.